We're basically the only technology company out there. We're software as a service, only software application out there that will tie together all of a student's technology, content, resources, people, like this massive world of the student experience. We tie it all together in kind of a single personalized dashboard, and there's really no other solution that does that.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, this is Max Pittman from WriteForMe, and you're listening to another episode of the Business Ninjas podcast, where we meet the experts who are making things happen and growing their businesses. And today we're talking about Pathify with Mr. Matt Hammond, who's the CRO at Pathify. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking some time to tell your story, and excited to dive into Pathify. And for people who aren't aware, Pathify is in the SaaS space, focused specifically on higher ed tech. The company itself has been around since 2018, and so love to dive into a little bit about like who the company is and what your focuses are and why customers come to you guys to solve their problems and what your software does for them. But before we dive into the organization itself, our community is definitely built of executives like yourself, entrepreneurs, and also lots of sales and marketing leaders. So as a CRO there at Pathify, I'd love it if you could tell our community a little bit about yourself and maybe some of the things you're focused on.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, I'm based out of Denver. I'm actually from the East Coast. I grew up in Massachusetts, went to school in Vermont, and I had a bunch of really close friends that I grew up with, throughout growing up, and a few of them ended up going to the University of Colorado in Boulder. So during school, I came out and visited a couple times and totally fell in love with it. So when I graduated, I said, all right, I'm going to throw my skis in the car. I'll go out there. I'll be a ski bum for a year. And that was like 20 years ago. So I never left. But anyway, yeah, since, really the majority of the time I've been out here, I've been in technology sales, working with startups. I think this is number 5 for me. And I've been really focused, at the beginning as an individual contributor, and then as time progressed, building sales and marketing teams. So that's me.
Love it. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about like your journey from like individual contributor up into, leading a team to then managing a team. Like, tell us a little bit about like that journey, and love to kind of hear a little bit about your advice there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd start by saying I was really fortunate early in my career to work for a couple of startups that were just sort of on these rocket ship inclines. And so, I started off just like a lot of folks do, on a sales floor, with cubicles and all that stuff, banging out 150 to $200 a week. Was on a monthly quota, had to sell high volume, won a lot, lost a lot. Which I think was a really, really important sort of beginning for me. I think a lot of young salespeople are constantly like, oh, I got to get that enterprise role. I need to constantly be trying to sell bigger deals. And I always try and coach folks like, start off in something transactional. Start off where you're building that muscle. You're winning a ton. You're losing a ton. It's almost just like going to the gym, right? You're just building those muscles. And anyway, I did that for about a year. The company I was at got acquired, and actually was able to move into sort of a major account role there. And then after that, moved on to a different company as a senior account executive, transitioned to selling to public companies in the US, so some of the biggest companies in the world. Did that for, I think, about a year or so. And that was when I sort of made the transition over into sales leadership. So that was kind of funny. I was working with a VP of sales, and he's a mentor of mine. He's a close friend of mine, and he was going to promote me into sort of a account management, sales manager role. So I'd be managing 5 or 6 folks that are upselling and cross-selling. And we both kind of thought like that's going to be like an easy transition. It's not going to be too intense. And little did I know that at the same time he was sort of looking at working at another business. So basically, I was a senior account executive one Friday. The next Friday, I was promoted to become, this account management sales manager. The next Friday, he left, and I was the only sales leader. So I actually ended up inheriting the entire sales organization. I was, I don't know, 27 years old or something like that. So anyway, it was a really crazy transition. Was completely unqualified for it, but I had a really, really great team around me. Truly like kind of going from college football to the NFL, I think. But like I said, it was a good company with a good team. And
Yeah.
I certainly learned a lot. It was awesome.
Yeah, like maybe going back to that, when the transition happened, obviously very quickly, like what were some of maybe like the primary challenges or maybe opportunities that you encountered to generate revenue for that platform for that company? Like what was it that like looking back on it that you saw was a challenge or opportunity for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we were sort of I guess you could say a startup. The company had been around for a while, but what we were selling was new. There was a new type of financial reporting that public companies needed to do. And so there was a mandate from the SEC that all these companies had to transition to do this new form of reporting. And there was a whole host of just these old grizzled companies that had been doing something similar for public companies for many years, and we were sort of the upstart that came in and had a new way of doing it. And so I think initially there was a ton of name recognition stuff, which as a startup guy, that's something I'm almost always facing at the beginning, is just getting people to know who we are. There's credibility that you need to build and things of that nature, but if you stick to it and you do the right type of demand gen and you have hundreds and thousands of conversations, I mean, the company gets better and you get your name out there, and pretty soon you're not a startup anymore.
Yeah, right. Well, I'd love to see, like, as we evolve this conversation, obviously we talk about Pathify, right? Like what type of demand gen strategies have you guys implemented? So let's talk really quickly though about Pathify.
Sure.
Imagine we're on Shark Tank. Maybe I'm the shark, you're the shark, I don't know, but like you need a pitch, your service and solution, right? I'm curious, like, could you give me the elevator pitch for Pathify?
Yeah, so we're basically the only technology company out there. We're software as a service, only software application out there that will tie together all of a student's technology, content, resources, people, like this massive world of the student experience. We tie it all together in kind of a single personalized dashboard, and there's really no other solution that does that. So, traditionally higher ed has been kind of a two-legged stool of major applications. So you've got your student information system, which is sort of the ERP for the school, and then learning management system, which is what delivers the training content. And you just have like hundreds of other point solutions and communication methods. And basically, we become that single UI layer that ties it all together, so that a student can access anything they need on any device at any time. So
Interesting.
you could also say we're a student portal.
Okay. So who, like, obviously there's a focus on education, right? Tell me a little bit about like who that ideal client might be. Is it a certain size of school? Like, do you focus only in the higher education space? Do you focus on, other educational levels? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, it's right now almost exclusively higher ed. So we do have a couple of schools that we work with that sort of are on the fringe of higher ed, but almost exclusively higher ed right now. So colleges and universities. Primary focus has been to date in the US, although we're starting to expand internationally as well, which is exciting. And as far as the ideal customer goes, people ask me that all the time, right? Is it private schools? Is it public schools? Is it religiously affiliated schools, or big schools, small schools, things like that? And the reality is we work with all of them. I think our biggest customer right now, school system, is probably in the 70,000 student range or something like that. So pretty big. We also have a couple seminaries we work with that have 70 or 80 students. So that's obviously a huge spectrum. I think it tends to be less about a school's, whether they're private or public or things of that nature. It kind of has to do with the complexity of the school. We tend to fit well in complex schools, maybe with multiple campuses and things of that nature. And I'd say we're seeing the biggest growth right now with schools that have more than 20,000 students, but that doesn't mean we don't serve smaller schools.
Sure. So give me a couple of those, like maybe top 2 or 3 use cases as to why a customer maybe would come inbound, to Pathify with a specific challenge or problem that you guys can solve for, or maybe some of the opportunities that come from outbound that you guys have identified as good fits.
So I guess maybe start with kind of the existing student portal landscape and what that looks like. I mean, it goes without saying, higher ed is not known for being, at the bleeding edge of technology, right? They're not necessarily early adopters of the most advanced technology. So a lot of schools right now have basically what we would call a link farm as their portal. It's a website that has links to all of this stuff, right? And so it could be links to technology, it could be links to athletics, it could be links to advising, and there's probably 15 other categories that you could put things into. And so a link farm, when it begins, is probably pretty well organized, but as time progresses, it just becomes unusable. And so you have your student portal is basically this website that has 800 links, right? And so how are you gonna find what you need? That's kind of the world in which we find ourselves for a lot of schools. So we will have a lot of schools that come to us and say, we're investing all this money in all these great programs, whether it's technology or resources for students, and they don't even know it exists, right? And so, especially today with the way kind of digital natives operate, you can't send them on a wild goose chase. They're not going to go on a treasure hunt to find information. And so, to sort of flip that around, I think we kind of come at the problem a little bit differently, and we say, well, we're going to enable schools to kind of serve up the right content, personalized content to the right people at any time on any device. And shockingly, when you do that, you drive adoption and you drive student engagement. So that's one of the main use cases, just making life easier and making sense of all of the information that students are needing to interact with. But I guess the other end of this is, we're not the only company that does this. I mean, there are other student portals out there. There are other mobile apps that do some of this stuff. What's interesting, though, is that they're very, very technology and content focused, which is important. You need to be able to find that stuff. They don't focus on people. There's no people component. And so one of our biggest differentiators is we're also going to connect you with the groups that you want to be a part of, with the people that you want to spend time with. And those could be co-curricular or extracurricular, what have you. The sky's kind of the limit. But we tend to think that working the community into the app and working the community into the capability, what you end up with if you implement is this really cool kind of digital reflection of what makes your campus unique. And that's not something that anyone else is doing.
Interesting. I'm just thinking, like, the whole time you're talking, I'm thinking back of like, what was Max's experience in college, and like, how was I able to like get around and be able to choose the classes that I wanted to choose, and be able to like it also, like, I don't know, I feel like I used Blackboard. I feel like everyone used Blackboard as like the main interface. Is that like a competitor? Or are we even in the ballpark there?
They're not a competitor. Actually, they're a partner of ours. So Blackboard is a learning management system, right? And so it is the technology application designed to deliver learning content to students, right? So that could happen remotely, obviously in the pandemic. If you didn't have a learning management system, you were up the creek. Thankfully, most schools do. But it can also be used to support teaching in the classroom and things of that nature. So the learning management by design is heavily academically focused.
Yeah.
You could say that we handle everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more to the college experience than the few hours a day you sit in the classroom. And it's not that we don't impact academics. There's a whole host of ways that we do. And again, we partner with all of the major learning management systems. They're some of our best partners. But there's just a whole lot more that again, is pretty community oriented that we can facilitate.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, right, you are making, well, schools seem more innovative for kids who are living in a digital era where they all are very savvy. Obviously on all the way things have evolved since when I was in college. It wasn't too long. It was only 10 years ago to where kids are now, and like how the people they expect an updated approach, right? They don't want to be living in 2013. They want to live in 2023. And it seems like you provide like an innovative way for them to engage with the content, engage with the university, engage with their education, and also engage with each other.
That's well said. I'm not sure if you spoke with a bunch of students whether they would ever consider their university innovative. That might be a bridge too far, but I think the reality is the way that humans have come to interact with technology has changed a lot in the last 10 years. I mean, I graduated 20 years ago, so none of this stuff existed when I was going to school. But I guess if you think about the way a lot of consumer software applications work, they're hyper personalized, right? Whether it's Amazon or one of the streaming services, like they know who you are, they know what to serve you, and guess what? It works, right? You buy stuff, you download stuff, and so that's the type of experience that people and students specifically have come to expect. So we hope to replicate that in a very positive way. So as an example, I don't know what you studied, but I'm sure you are a great scholar. Let's say you studied history, or I'll just use myself as an example. I studied history. I think I took one math class the entire time I was at school because I had to. And if I had this software experience where I was constantly being bombarded with content about math and algebra and whatever else, trigonometry, I don't know, I would laugh. I wouldn't look at it. I would never use it. But if I was really focused on what I was studying, if that was the type of information that was being serviced or the clubs I was in, I would probably be more engaged. So it's trying to take a consumer experience approach to how we deliver content.
I love that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Really interesting. Yeah, this is really interesting. Like what, I guess when playing into kind of that user experience, like how do you guys think about like what is the role that I guess like the data plays or the user insights play into like shaping, the strategies there at Pathify?
It's a good question. It is in academia. The way that you can use data is probably different than in sort of the business world. And so with that being said, there's a lot of student success software out there. There's some really great companies doing really great work that they mine and leverage data just like a marketing organization would. And oftentimes what they're trying to understand is who's at risk, right? Every time a school loses a student, that's a financial problem, right? And so obviously retention is important, recruiting is important. And I think traditionally a lot of the student success software has been fed by demographic data and also academic data. And those are two, interesting, important data points for us. There's this whole world of like behavioral data that you could associate to student success, right? The connected student is a successful student. A guy I work with used to say that all the time. If you're engaged with the community, if you're in clubs, if you're going to events and things of that nature, the chances of you, well, first of all, succeeding academically are greater, but the success or the chance of you melting, as they would say, the school not retaining you is significantly less. So what we're doing right now in terms of data is we just released actually about a month ago a really, really cool sort of native analytics function within our app that will start to unlock some of that information. Where are people going? What content are people looking at? Who's engaged with what and things of that nature. I wouldn't go so far as to say that is going to be directly correlated to student success yet, we'll get there for sure. And it's been really cool to see how excited they are about understanding better the lay of the land outside of the classroom.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you diving into like some of the, some of the ways you guys are innovating, who your ideal clients are and why they're coming to Pathify. Let's talk a little bit about, you as the CRO, right? You're there to drive revenue, right? I'm curious to like, kind of pick your brain on like maybe the approach you're taking to marketing and even it sounds like customer acquisition, right? Like to drive potential growth with current accounts, right? Like, offering native integrations that they'll probably need to upgrade to do and have to be able to further engage with their students. So I'm just kind of curious what specific channels or strategies you guys have been using from a marketing perspective to drive customer acquisition.
Yeah, so we like to think of it, marketing and sales development and even the prospecting that the salespeople are doing. We just look at that as demand gen, as sort of a big category. And I mean, I started with Pathify full time a little bit more than 3 years ago. Started as a consultant before that, but we had like 7 customers or something like that when I got involved with the business. So this truly has been a go-to-market exercise, taking the product to market. One of the reasons that I personally was interested in the business early on when I was consulting was that our co-founders were willing to invest in demand gen. And I basically told the story that's going to have to be the biggest part of our operating budget, maybe outside of the product development and things of that nature. And so as a result, even though we are still small as a percentage of our operating budget, I mean, I've never spent this much on demand gen, which is pretty cool. And it's enabled us to be pretty multi-channel, right? So we do all the traditional stuff. We've got an unbelievable sales development team that leverages technology to make like 10,000 dials a week or 20,000 dials a week. So we're blanketing the market there. Of course, we engage with all the digital channels. We do put a lot into content marketing, and we prospect from a sales perspective. So I'd say it's been a really balanced approach to what we do. We certainly have skewed pretty heavy on the good old-fashioned prospecting. So hopefully that helpful, just as a sort of a baseline.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some seasonality here too, right? So tell me, like, how are you approaching like different seasons that, because the school calendar is different than, regular B2B calendar.
Yeah, so I mean, our financial year end, like a lot of companies, is the end of December. In higher ed, it's flip forward 6 months, right? So today's June 29th. Tomorrow is the end of the year. Sorry, I got a hailstorm going on right outside, but kind of wild out there.
Can't hear it on my end. So
okay, cool. So anyway, we're approaching, tomorrow is the year end for almost every institution. And then of course, at least academically, a lot of the schools will be out until somewhere between August 15th and September 15th. So the seasonality tends to follow the academic calendar. If most schools operate on a semester system. And so, we find ourselves from a demand gen perspective in a world in which kind of February to maybe midway through May tends to be a really active period for us, active in engagement. Goes down a little bit during graduation, comes up a little bit after graduation. And then, midway through July, toward the end of July, things will get really quiet again until September 15th or so. And then the rest of the years, it's tough. You've got all these big holidays and breaks and things of that nature. So we have to deliver from September 15th until Thanksgiving. And then we might have a little couple week window before the winter holidays start. That's new for me. I've never worked in such a seasonal business, and it can be frustrating, but you got to hit those highs where you can. Say it again.
How long are those sales cycles then? Like once like you're in that September to Thanksgiving, like are we talking 90 days, 60 days? Like I guess it probably depends on how big the school is, I'm assuming, right? Just kind of curious.
It is completely all over the place. I would say our average sales cycle, if you literally took the average, is probably 7 to 8 months, which doesn't feel that bad, right? I mean, that's not a year, but it is truly an exercise in averages, right? So I'll give you an example. We engage with the school. Let's say it's May 1st, right? And they're really raring to go, and they love us, and they want to get things moving. What it comes down to is whether they're going to be able to work in the budget, that's leading up until June 30th. And so there are some schools that are trying to spend money. Maybe they have use it or lose it budget, or maybe they have budget left over. And so those deals move fast. We can close those deals in a month and a half. There will also be schools that we engage with in that time frame where budget won't open up until the following end of June, and those are going to take 13-15 months.
Yeah.
So that can be really frustrating, but now that we're again 3.5 years into this, we've started to plane a little bit, in the sense that some deals close quick, some take a medium amount of time, some take forever. And I would say also, one of the big wins last year, we had a massive Q4 from a sales perspective, which is not expected in higher ed. So I think whether it's the skill set of the team, our name in market, the need in market, we are seeing a little bit more of sort of the off-cycle buying, which is good.
Right. I mean, with expectations kind of never being higher for sales teams to perform, but also, the world that we're living in, where sales cycles continue to get longer and grow out. Like, how are you guys approaching, that with the sales team? Like, what types of practices or, strategies are you, sharing with the team to collaborate with them on to try to, either accelerate those opportunities, or, do what they can to even close them out, so that way they can focus on other opportunities? Like, how are you guys approaching that?
I'll start by giving credit to our board, actually. So when you talk about expectations and results and things of that nature, obviously 12 to 15 months ago, the world completely changed. We had been in this long growth at all costs phase, where you go out, you raise a ton of money, and man, you got to spend that stuff and just pour it into results. And then of course with some of the economy stuff with the war in Ukraine last year, that tune changed very quickly to growth at all costs to efficient growth, right? And really managing spend. I know a lot of folks that are being asked to manage spend, but are also being asked to deliver unrealistic results. That's not the case at Pathify. We have done a really good job of figuring out what the right amount to spend is, and what is reasonable and a good goal for growth. So that it starts there. That helps with the salespeople, because I don't think any of our salespeople feel like their quotas or their expectations are unreasonable. But I think you're probably asking more about kind of the tactics and things of that nature. For us, there's a key part of our sales process, our forecasting methodology, that we refer to as the source of urgency. It's a criteria that we use to forecast, and it's not the sense of urgency. It's not what happens if they don't sign on June 30, what happens to the price. Source of urgency is really about, what are the bad things that happen for the school, for the buyer, for the individual, if they don't make a decision, for the student, right? And I think our team has done a good job of really kind of pushing on that stuff, and particularly over the past couple of quarters, we've seen some success in accelerating deals by being heavily focused on the source of urgency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are those, pain points of doing nothing, right? Yes, I know that very well, right? Like, trying to be able to well, if you're not doing anything grow, what are you going to be doing to try to change this next year? Now we're putting things off for another 6 months, 12 months before, the next opportunity for you guys to grow might come along. And now we're missing out on, 6 months worth of growing or opportunities, coming inbound or outbound that you guys probably could be generating here now. Right. So there's, I think, a fine line for sure, playing a little bit of offense, in this macroeconomic climate, versus playing a little defense as well. So it's like, how do we, obviously it's from discovery and understanding what matters in people's worlds today, what's going on in their list of priorities and what they're prioritizing today versus maybe what they're prioritizing 6 months from now, to be able to optimize, be able to get them to think about those pain points in a way that maybe they weren't thinking about before if they don't solve for those. So I definitely know that very well.
There's another important part to that. That is probably worth mentioning here, particularly for us in higher ed. The folks that we're selling to, I mean, we're usually selling through the IT vertical, but sometimes it's student affairs and student life, occasionally marketing and academic affairs. But oftentimes these folks aren't necessarily experienced buyers. They're definitely not experienced sellers. So really, we're expecting these champions that we're working with to go sell Pathify internally. And they're not just convincing their boss. At a university, you've got a committee of 70 people and all these coalitions that you need to put together. So I learned this a long time ago in a different vertical, but training your salespeople to be teachers of selling and teaching your prospect, your champion, to be effective in selling you internally. You got to focus on it. You can't expect them to know how to do that. And so I think we've made some progress there as well.
Oh, yes, that's a great point. Absolutely. Right. You have to create those internal champions because, most of the selling is done without you in the room.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great point. And creating those champions, giving them the talk tracks, giving them the data, giving them everything they need to take to the team. Is the only thing is you're not going to be there in the room, right? So trying to spend as much time with those champions as possible, get them armed to the teeth, and ideally get multiple people armed to the teeth too, and get as multi-threaded as possible when they do take this internally to sell it for you.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's helpful. I appreciate you sharing kind of like your philosophy and advice for how your team is navigating kind of where we are today. As we wrap things up here, love to kind of give you the floor, and as a CRO, like what else is going on there at Pathify? Anything that you think our listeners need to know about who you guys are, what you guys do that we haven't covered yet, and how can people find you guys?
Well, that's a good question. You can find us hopefully all over the place since we've put a lot into demand gen. We've got a really great podcast called The Connected Campus. Obviously we're on social. We show up at a lot of events. So if you're in higher ed and going to an event, let us know and we'll probably be there. So I think we're pretty easy to find, in terms of how higher ed people would track us down. Things going on for us, really interesting conversations around how AI could impact some of this stuff. I think a lot of, and rightfully so, there's a lot of really difficult questions and answers and discussions in higher ed right now around AI and how it's impacting the academic side of the world. The good news is you don't have to answer a lot of those questions on the administrative or the IT side of the world, right? There's a lot of opportunity for college administrators, school administrators, IT folks to be leveraging AI to create all kinds of economies of scale and provide a better experience for students. And shouldn't be too long here before we start to pull back the curtain on some really cool stuff we're working on that we think will be pretty noteworthy.
That's awesome. What kind of time frame though? Like, are we talking like a year from now, 6 months from now? Like, do you have any purview into that?
Yeah. And so what we try to do, this is, a show about marketing. So we're always trying to weigh the release of new capabilities and new functionality versus when it's going to make the biggest impact in market, right? So you don't want to wait too long, especially with something like AI, which changes every day. But we really do want to try and find the right time. So it's not going to be in the middle of the summer in higher ed. We're probably talking early fall. There's a couple of conferences, big conferences that we'll be well represented at. So we're probably talking a few months out.
Very cool. That's awesome. Excited to follow along and see how you guys are growing and scaling. Everyone go check out pathify.com. definitely reach out to Matt. Matt, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? Probably LinkedIn. You tell us. Yeah.
Hit me up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. And for anyone who's listening, if you're out of school, if you are on the like kind of that IT team, if you're looking for a way for your school to attract prospective students, you need potentially a portal for them, and trying to build a community and build success, and additionally, ideally keep people there and keep students there. Definitely check out Pathify. I'm not paid by Pathify, but hopefully I got a little bit of that right. But yeah, appreciate you being a part of the podcast, Matt, and hanging out with us today and sharing your story.
My pleasure. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone go check out pathify.com. That wraps up another episode of our Business Ninjas podcast. Matt, thank you so much for telling us obviously what you guys are doing, who you are, and how you guys are growing and scaling, and kind of what your challenges are. And I appreciate you diving into that with us today.
You got it. Thank you, Max.
Thanks. Awesome. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Cheers.